Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stronger Roots podcast. We are honored to have two incredible women join us today, Melanie and Michelle. They both bring unique insight, experience, and passion for our conversation about the effects of parental alienation, coercive control, and what that looks like, and how to help those living with that reality. Before we dive in, Beth is going to share a little bit about these ladies.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both for being here. It means a lot that you took your time to show up and share your expertise, and we appreciate you coming. So first, we'll talk about Melanie Mize. She is a seasoned attorney with extensive experience in family law and civil matters, with an advanced degree in behavioral analysis. She serves families through the court in the roles of guardian ad litem and parenting coordinator. And additionally, Melanie has a mediation and collaborative law practice. Melanie is expanding her professional path, shifting from traditional litigation to a more solution-focused approach through counseling and coaching. She integrates her legal expertise with a strong understanding of family dynamics and behavioral patterns to support families directly and consult with attorneys seeking to improve the outcomes of family court. Her work is grounded in deep commitment to helping families navigate conflict with clarity, compassion, and a long-term child-centered perspective. So thank you, Melanie, for your contributions today. Michelle Minette is an ABD psychologist and holistic life coach with a rich background spanning community, private, and forensic mental health settings. She specializes in helping individuals heal from narcissistic abuse, navigate high conflict dynamic, and manage crisis situations with clarity, confidence, and emotional resilience. Michelle authored the mandatory parenting education class for divorcing couples in Butler County, Ohio, and helped design and implement the county's outpatients competency restoration program. She's extensively trained in the admission, scoring, and interpretation of psychological instruments frequently used in forensic evaluations and expert reports. Drawing on her expertise in psychological testing, behavioral analysis, trauma recovery, and parenting through crisis, Michelle provides a strategic guidance in high conflict family court matters.
All
Thank you
right.
both for attending today. It's impressive.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
And you both are our first guest on Stronger Roots podcast. So thank you again.
Aw,
I know. What an honor, right?
it is an honor.
Yeah. So now that our listeners kind of know who you are and the work that you do, let's just jump into it. Let me ask you about when you hear the words parental alienation, what's the first thing that kind of comes to your mind?
Well, for me,
Yeah.
from what I see in the courts, it's not always recognized or believed a lot of times. But I think really what we're looking at is there a continuous and systematic interference in a parent-child relationship by the other parent that has some sort of impact or harm to that parent-child relationship. So essentially, one parent is engaging in behaviors that really manipulate that child away from the other parent.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think
And
it's really important how you're saying that, because I feel like in the last few years, the term parental alienation has kind of become a buzzword,
yes,
and it's being used to hurt and not define truthfully what the actions really are and how that is damaging children.
yeah, yeah. And I notice a lot of times as well that someone may be claiming parental alienation, but what's really happening is that their own behavior is estranging them from the children. And so they're instead of just using the buzzwords, if we really look at the actual behavior, what's going on, what are the patterns there, that's really important.
Mhm.
Yeah, because when we really look at it from the psychological perspective, right, parental alienation is really, I would argue, even like the worst form of emotional abuse that you can do to a child, right? You're taking away, you're manipulating their ability to see the world as it is. You're taking away their relationship, not with one parent, but with both,
Mhm.
right? And the reason being is you can't engage in parental alienation of their other parent and love the child because you're hurting them. You can't engage in it without using coercive control tactics, which I know we're going to get into, right? And all of that requires teaching the child conditional love. And when you teach a child, you're taking away the one relationship the only relationship we ever get the opportunity to have unconditional love in. And that's needed in order to have emotionally stable, healthy, really good boundaries, different from requests and ultimatums. I hate that that's become a buzzword that's been used horribly as well, right? You take that all away, and I believe that's a very critical part of child development.
But I feel like too, at the end of all of it, in healthy parent situations where you have two parents who maybe have had a failed marriage or they just can't get along anymore, those two parents still have the ability to put the kids first and to support them and to support healthy relationships. And I think that's some of what we're seeing in a lot of this is coming out where one's pitting the kids against the other, and healthy parents can co-parent together and still not have anything to do with each other when they're putting the kids first and the needs of the kids and their mental health first.
Yeah, it takes a level of emotional maturity that we don't always see, though.
Exactly.
Or isn't accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go through a divorce, whether it was a toxic relationship or not, we're in fight, flight, or freeze, right? Which means our best skills at regulating our emotions and impulse control aren't fully available. And so just accepting that and recognizing that can also create barriers to harming the children through the process.
Yeah. I wanted to ask another thing as far as we kind of talk about, getting the kids involved, but there's a word for it. It's called triangulation. And what do you see that kind of look like or play out in co-parenting and custody issues when you're triangulating? What does that really mean?
Oh, all right.
I think first, what is
Right.
triangulation?
There you go.
So we're drawing in a third party into a situation because we're not going to directly confront the other person or even our own behavior. So we draw in this other third party to kind of mediate that or take some of the intensity out of it. And what I see is people do that with their children a lot. By talking bad about the other parent, manipulating the child against the other parent somehow, using the child to relay messages, maybe interrogating the child for information about what's going on at the other parent's home instead of just directly asking. I also see that go the other way, where the kids are the ones kind of doing the triangulating there. Maybe they want to get out of consequences at one parent's house. And so they tell the other parent that, it's so terrible here, and then they're looking to be rescued or something like that. And then one of the other type of triangulation I see a lot in these custody cases is the parent that is using the court to do that triangulation. They're asking the court to step in, and they're that third party to, I don't know, take down the intensity of what's going on between the parents.
Yeah, I would say, triangulation is, when I was thinking about it before, I was like, it's any intentional act, right, to disrupt the child's relationship with the other parent if we're talking about it in a co-parenting situation. But here's the thing, triangulation happens unintentionally often too, right? I mean, so I lost my train of
It's
thought.
not always like a negative thing because it does happen in the course of just relationships in general. Yeah, but sometimes it gets to be a tactic that's being used to really manipulate a situation, and that's really harmful.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a spectrum with it. At the point where it becomes harmful is when it starts to affect the relationship. And really, when we're talking about triangulation, we're talking about crappy boundaries, right? And it's our job as parents to coach, teach, train our children on how to do a lot of things, but also how to have healthy relationships. And so, you're like, well, sometimes it's a kid. Man, children always triangulate, right? Children aren't manipulative. They're little scientists. It is their job
Like how you
to
put
try and to triangulate, but we wouldn't call it necessarily triangulation because they're just being a kid. You know, we don't want to pathologize that, but we have to recognize when they're doing it as parents. You know, when I teach the parenting class, I always give this example where my child would be looked at me and was like, you know, we have the best time. I have the best time at your house because you play video games with me and the other parent doesn't, right? And, and I'm not gonna lie, I really wanted to respond and be like, I know, because I'm the better parent. I'm the
I'm
better
actually
parent.
being a
No,
parent.
just, yeah, right. Yeah, right.
No.
No, but right, if we go back to keeping it child focused, my child deserves to have the best relationship my child can have with the other parent, right? And so my response was, you're right. We have a great time doing that together when you're here.
Mhm.
What is it that you do with your other parent at the other house that just the two of you do here?
Yeah.
Right. And so being able to catch those things, and it doesn't matter, toxic or not, being able to catch those things and provide the space for the child to have a good relationship with both parents is important. And so that's how you avoid that triangulation or the little scientist that you have, right? Trying to figure that out. But
Sometimes I
really,
think it's just the child noticing those things and just saying, you know, and just like you said, being a kid, but they're just bringing it out. And we do supervised visits here, and the kids will kind of say things like that, but they're just noticing. They just say things. They just
yeah.
say things and they're just noticing. So I think a lot of times, well, I know a lot of times in those situations that sometimes it's kind of used as, oh, well, they're picking one parent over the other when they're really not. They're just a kid and they're noticing things and they're just speaking on it.
I notice a lot in the group that run the parents often will apply adult intentions
Mhm.
to children's phrases or actions. And so it's really a matter of working from a curious space instead of a defensive space when those things come up, asking questions and figuring out where. But the triangulation we're talking about is like when we teach the parenting class, there's a whole list of what we call pain games and engaging in any of those, where you put down the other parent, which is number one rule you should never do, right? Or you use the child as a messenger, or you parentify the child,
What does that
those
exactly mean? Can you kind of talk about what that means, parentify?
parentifying. Oh,
It's like a role reversal.
yeah, it's where you rely on the child to be, and on the mild end of the spectrum, you rely on the child to just talk about your day and the adult situations that you've been in, right? And so we don't think about their last social emotion. The last stage of development is social emotional. It happens in their teen years. And they look and act like little adults, but they're not. They're just learning about relationships and they need to be free to learn about how relationships work at their level. And so I try to use video game levels to,
Yeah.
right, get us to think about that in a more I don't know, concrete way, right? I wouldn't expect somebody on level 3, or if we use age, like video game levels, I wouldn't expect somebody on level 15 with level 15 armor and weapons and experience and magic spells, depending on what you're playing, to jump into level 35 and survive, right? And so, so that on the mild end. On the other end, it's them taking care of their parents, physically and emotionally. Like those of us who are a little older remember after school specials where we watch the high school football star have to take care of mom who was an alcoholic and drop out of football and get a job and maybe drop out of school, those kind of things. And there's a term for that. You can cut this out if you want. I like the term because I think it really gets the gravity of the issue, but it is kind of a trigger word, emotional incest, when it gets to be that severe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from a psychological perspective, Can we talk a little bit about what coercive control and the way that it affects the children's view of one parent over the child or over the other parent, like how coercive control kind of works with all of this? We'll
Yeah.
jump right ahead into that world.
It's really coercive control, I think oftentimes is a very covert way, of exacting all of this. And when we talk about, we didn't say this about parental alienation, and I think it's important to say, with parental alienation, what happens is that one parent and everything about them is great, and the other parent and everything about them is horrible from the child's perspective. It's very concrete and it's very separate, right? Children should have, you know, they like and things that they hate about both parents. It doesn't have to be 50-50, right? But there should be some kind of distribution there. And so parental alienation, it doesn't come about because the parent who's alienating is saying the other mom's horrible. They're doing very covert things to get the child to believe it's their idea, right? Like a child showing up at the hospital, or sorry, the other parent showing up at a hospital when the child was with the original parent or the parent in residence, the other parent showing up at the hospital and saying something like, okay, baby, your warmth is here now, right? See, like that feels creepy to us, right? But it's not blatant. And then the child starts saying the other parents their warmth. And so it's this back door into convincing the child to see you as all good, or the alienating parent as all good, and the alienated parent is all bad, right?
It's brainwashing.
It is brainwashing, because if you ask the kid and say, do you see that they're manipulating? The kid's like, what? You don't think I can make up my own mind? You don't think that I decided that you were horrible? Like, you don't even respect me, right? Right. So when we get into coercive control, it's like that, right? It's like the under the breath, well, they had to pay child support, I mean, I could have gotten you this, or it's the little things that are the coercive control, even down to controlling the money of the other parent so that the child has less economic advantage at the other house. What are other ways? Like it's crippling the other parent in ways that are peripheral, usually, that damage that relationship with the child.
I sometimes see things like just kind of last second modifying a parenting time exchange or something so that then the other parent isn't able to do it, and then see your mom didn't really care about you, she didn't show up, or something like that. Things like that can really build up.
Yeah, you're right. The kids don't realize that they're being groomed through that whole process. They don't understand that,
right?
And they don't see it.
Yeah.
And it's not just kids. I mean, it's like a lot of the work I do, they just don't understand that person really has control over them and their mind and how they're perceiving things because it's been created for them.
And kids just aren't gonna naturally think that their parent is dangerous and doing something bad to them. Because if they did, like they're explode, because this is the person that's supposed to protect them, right? And so they just don't think that way.
Well, but then that's a conflict. It's a conflict for them that they're seeing it as, well, even if they start to see a little bit, they don't want to see it because that's the parent. That's the parent that's been here for me. That's the parent who has always been there or loves me and would never hurt me and do this. So there's a tight conflict there of coming to a realization that really isn't a safe person, that really isn't a safe place, and these things have really been told to me and they're really not truths. And kids just aren't developed to understand that. They're just not developed far enough to really see it and understand it and be able to accept the gravity of it.
Well, even young adults or people writing reports for the court don't see it, right?
It's a hard dynamic.
But also, I mean, even down to like the parent insisting on using the right that they have in the state to request the therapy records for the child. That's coercive control, because they're shutting, whether they access them or not, if the kid knows they're asking, the child is not going to ever talk about how they're treating them in the home again. That's coercive control, right? The little rewards and punishments based on what the child does in the home, based on whether or not they report on the other parent. And so it happens both ways,
Yeah.
to both the other parent and to the child.
Question for Melanie. Legally speaking, how is parental alienation defined, and how is it different than high conflict in the court system? Because you hear that all the time, right? Like the high conflict, oh, this is just a high conflict court matter, and how do you?
Yeah. So it's not parental alienation is not necessarily defined in the courts. It's a controversial topic, but really what we're looking at is that systematic, continuous interference by one parent in the parent-child relationship, the other parent, and there has to be some sort of harm. So the kid is actually rejecting the other parent. That is different than high conflict situation, because high conflict can just refer to a general parenting situation where one or both parents are just highly contentious. And it doesn't necessarily require one parent to be manipulating the other child. It could just be that, the parents argue all the time about anything and everything. But one thing I do want to point out is a lot of times what I see is a case, a co-parenting matter, these people are labeled as it's just high conflict. These people are just high conflict. And a lot of times it's not. It's that one person is high conflict and the other person is a victim of that individual. And it's very unfortunate, because what I see is that these parents, their situation gets labeled as just being high conflict, and then it's kind of written off or like pushed onto some other third party to deal with, like, well, they're high conflict, let's send them to co-parenting counseling, instead of really getting at the heart of where's this conflict originating. Because if it is with just one of the parents, maybe examining how good that parent is for this dynamic. Like, do you really need to have shared parenting when one of the parents is high conflict, and how is that going to impact the child long term?
That's good.
Glad you said that, because I see that a lot. It's deemed high conflict, and the courts, whether they just don't know or they don't, or just aren't aware, which is another reason why Danielle and I set out on this journey, because they just, labeling a case high conflict is just too easy to do. It's just too easy.
Yeah.
When you're not able to look at the situation, and then one party almost kind of can manipulate the court. And then and then if the other one is trying to stand up for themselves, if there's not a space in the when it's labeled high conflict, I just don't see that there's a space for the victim to be able to stand their ground, speak up, and defend themselves and defend their children.
Yeah.
Because it's high conflict. Well, so it just gets pushed aside, because, we all know that in those situations, the judges only know what they're told in that moment. They only know what they're told from both parties, both attorneys, and the evidence that's presented to them. They don't know the backstory. They don't know the things that are going on, and whether they even use one of those programs where they communicate. Who really monitors that? And are you really watching for the patterns and that kind of stuff? Nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. So it's usually,
I would argue, in situations where you have parental alienation and coercive control and with triangulation, where all of these things are happening, it takes two. And people want to say, oh, well, there's always two stories. Right.
Yeah.
That is one of the most invalidating, minimizing things that you can say to somebody who's coming out of a toxic or a narcissistically abusive relationship.
Or it's one word against the other.
Oh,
don't even start on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So Michelle, I have a question for you. How can you tell when a child's anger towards like a targeted parent is the result of influence or manipulation versus their own experience?
Okay, so it was funny, we were talking about the question. Like my initial response is to say, does it matter? I mean, but that sounds so flippant, right?
Right.
It does matter for the child, right? But as far as the other parent, no. But I think one of the things that we have to be cautious about is when you respond to the weaponization of your child, you are validating your child as a weapon. So if we err on the side of having good structural, healthy boundaries, one of the things I focus on is when you're parenting with somebody that is manipulative, that is toxic, that has been abusive, and you're worried about these things, the goal isn't to parent in spite of them. The goal is to parent as if they're not there. So if we parent because the way they want us to, we're in one cage. If we parent in opposition to the way they want us to, we're in another cage. So if we're really doing parallel parenting, we're parenting the way that we know how to parent best without taking a peek over at that lane very often. And so one of the reasons for that too is because children are little scientists and we can't always trust what they tell us about the other house either. And so when we practice great boundaries, that stuff gets revealed. Doesn't matter to us if it gets revealed, except that we get the opportunity to. Not we have to clean up the damage. We get the opportunity to be the parent that helps them develop the skills to cope with that situation. And so, as I mentioned before, it's about being curious instead of being defensive. I wonder why you think that. Or first, actually, I'm going to back that up. First thing is to always validate, right? You caused the divorce. You're why we're broken up. That must be a horrible thing to feel. Right? And I know like this was a horrible thing to happen, right? This is very difficult for all of us. And I'm so sorry. You deserve to have a family that's all together. And I wish that I could provide that for you. And that was the plan. But I wonder why you challenge the thought, right? I wonder why you think that that's a very adult piece of information to have. I wonder why you think that. I wonder where that came from. Right. And so you start asking questions about that. And eventually, hopefully, you can get to them having some realizations. And if they don't have realizations in that conversation or they set up a barrier, they are monitoring, especially during the divorce and within the first year or two after, they're monitoring everything that they're saying to their parents. It's the one time you just can't, through no fault of your own, be your child's safe space. They got to figure it out again, So if they don't get there in that conversation, that's fine. You've done all you can. You've asked the questions, right? And that's our job.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. So question for both of you. What are some long-term emotional or psychological effects on children who have been triangulated against a parent? Is there a certain age that a child or teen or adult that has had this happen to them that tend to wake up and see what's happened to them? Like I imagine that realizing that is very painful when you kind of out of that.
So I think this is one of the biggest reasons that I've kind of gone away from litigation and more into working directly with families or doing guardian ad litem work, is that what I'm seeing happening with the courts is that they're perpetuating this generational trauma in the way they're handling these cases. I think that the long-term impact of what's going on here is we're producing these generations of kids that are being deprived of the ability to have complete, healthy, secure relationships. And so then we see them in they're the next generation of divorcing adults.
Yeah, I think at the root of it, we're not providing the space children need to develop their own personal identity, right? They need to, with their parents, have a safe space to explore their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own feelings, and their own perception of the world around them. And when they are triangulated, we're asking them to perform. And so then they start to attach their identity to performance and almost strictly external validation, right? And there should be a balance there. We should have some social comparison with some intrinsic reward happening, where we internally validate ourselves and we notice that we feel good about this and we feel empowered about this and we have some clarity about this. But when there's triangulation, they're constantly looking around them to figure out if what they did was the right thing or not. So they lose access to that internal compass. And I think in the long run, what we're really doing is we're flirting with adults that are going to have personality disorders. Like I think with Melanie, we're flirting with them, perpetuating the generational trauma in the relationships they have with other people, and should they have children in the future generations.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think it's important to notice on that, because the initial moment when that child learns that their parents are splitting up, there's no going back from that.
Mm.
And I think that, I see this as that's a trauma in that moment that none of us can really understand unless you've gone through it. I grew up in a home, my parents never did divorce. When my dad passed away, they'd been together 60 years. I didn't experience that. I've had other friends who did experience that. And in that moment, when that child is told that, that just shakes their entire world. It shakes their security. It shakes their confidence. It shakes, did I do something wrong? And there's so many things that go into a child's mind that they're trying to figure out and validate and make sense of why something happened. And a lot of the work I've done with some kids through the trauma things, even some young adults that I've worked in different groups that I've done, even within the jail community, it's like the day I looked at this group and said, you are not your trauma. You did not do this. This is not your fault. I had a grown man in a jail situation break down and start crying.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever told me that before.
Mm-hmm.
But we miss that. And to go back to where that, even though they know things may not be great, there might be arguing or fighting, or they see things that's uncomfortable, we fail to remember or to think of that if they've grown up in that situation, that's what's normal to them. And now everything they perceive to be normal has just absolutely blown apart. And then how do they move forward with that? And then when you have two parents who are so emotionally charged and hurt and things are going on there, and then you add in maybe some abuse, from one, that's just such a recipe for, I don't even know the word to put to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we expect them to bounce back and forth between homes and families and Christmases and all of this stuff and act what we perceive to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that trauma is not being addressed in the minute that it's being delivered to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never forget telling my child, that it's still like when you brought it up, even like I felt it again, right? It hit me again. It's hard. I think that there's some caution around that too. If we go too far one way, then we end up parenting in a permissive way that doesn't provide the structure they need to develop. Right. And so there's some kind of balance between validating and recognizing that we need to give them the space and to work on and heal from and move forward from this. And at the same time, we get to, it's an opportunity to give them the skills that they need in order to move through it. I think one of the mistakes that we tend to make as parents is we tend to emphasize our responsibility of protecting our children and give less importance to our need to arm our children with the skills that they need to handle life as random and unpredictable, and dynamic, right? And I think obviously protecting them is important, but we also have to recognize we can't always protect them. So we have to provide opportunities for them to just feel what they feel and help them cope.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So question for you, Melanie. In your legal work, have you seen cases where the child's voice was influenced or coached? And how do courts navigate that? And um, how do courts navigate situations where it's difficult to tell the child what their wishes are and if it's truly their own? I know that was a lot, a lot to ask right now.
I have seen that. I've definitely seen that. And, how the court navigates it really comes down to is, does the court even recognize it? Do they even see that it's happening? Or does the guardian ad litem or the custody evaluator see that this is happening? And a lot of times they don't. And so it's navigated in a way that it should be. And if the court isn't recognizing that this is happening, some of that comes down to, do they even know what to look for? Because they're not necessarily educated in the ways that they would need to be able to look for that kind of thing. And the parent that is really the victim of, and the child being the victim of it as well, that this, not having their own thoughts and being kind of manipulated by another parent. The parent may not be able to effectively educate the court about that because they can't necessarily afford an expert witness to come in and teach the court. I think it's like you brought up earlier, the judge and or the magistrate, they're really limited to what is the evidence that's actually presented to them in that moment. And if you're not going to put on some sort of witness that's going to teach the court, then they might not have the reference that they need.
Yeah. What do you think about so this is just kind of a side note, but what kind of option do courts have if a parent continues to share like correspondence with the child about adult matters, like essentially kind of recruiting the child to be on their side, like, hey, dad sent this or mom did this or whatever, and that's kind of recruiting the child to be involved in these type of matters? What is there anything that they can do about that, or
The
do you
court
see?
always has the option to restrict parenting time, to cut out parenting time altogether, or to have it supervised. They always have those options. I think, one of the hardest things that a family court is doing is they're weighing a parent's constitutional right to parent and what's in the best interest of the kid and that kid's rights. And a lot of times, the court is really wanting to be fair to the parents instead of being fair to the kids. But they always have the ability to say, you're involving this kid in these adult matters. They're not developmentally ready for this. Also, this is your kid, so they will never be ready to be in the middle of their parents' conflict, no matter how old they are. And so we're going to keep you from doing that by just keeping you from your kid. They always have that option. They also have the option to order parents into specific types of maybe trainings or counseling or something like that that's really designed to teach that parent what they're doing, getting them to evaluate their behavior and what the impact is on the kid. Because a lot of times parents just don't realize that this thing is going to impact their kid in a really specific way and that they should make a different choice. So the courts also have the option to kind of mandate that training. I don't see that used very often, but they have options.
Next, I didn't really know that part of it from what you were just saying.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, how often do they use it, right? Because we have the court does tend to err on the side of parents' rights, but also I don't think that the people, the actors in court have an understanding of the depth of the damage that's caused by not paying attention to the child's development. I don't think they understand the depth of the damage caused by parents sharing the details of the divorce. Right. So there's that. And the other thing I want to add, and I don't, maybe it's controversial, I don't care because I've actually been kind of disgusted by it. The times that I have seen the court mandate co-parenting, coaching, or reunification therapy, the professionals that they are sending these parents to do not have the experience and do not have the training in order to be able to provide these services. And it's extremely disappointing and heartbreaking.
I think also a lot of times if parents are ordered into some sort of co-parenting counseling or reunification therapy or coaching or whatever it may be, it's just this very general idea. Okay, go off to the co-parenting coaching. They don't give specific things that the court doesn't say, these are the things that we're noticing, these are the skills we need you to work on, or your action items in this. So when you don't send someone out with some sort of specific idea of what they're supposed to be doing, then the court isn't able to really monitor whether they effectively did it.
So it also just looks like they're checking off a box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I want to
see-
say this real quick about it too, because I failed to say it when I talked about it, because this also disgusts me. The people they send them to for reunification and the co-parenting coaching and stuff like that, they charge out of pocket more than any other mental health professional in this area. And that's also disgusting,
That is.
right?
Taking advantage. And but then if the court isn't monitoring that and holding, both parties accountable to go to that counseling, and then you have one party who's not willing to go to the counseling or doesn't want the child to go to the counseling, who's checking on that? Because the question is, why don't you want them to go?
Yeah.
What are you trying to hide? Why don't you want them to talk? I would think that, well, I know that healthy parents want the best for their kids, and they want to put their children in a situation where they can get the help that they need to navigate through these waters, to work through the traumas and everything that goes along with family separating. So why wouldn't you want your child to go? I see that in a lot of situations. I have cases that, of course, a lot of mine are CPS cases, but one or other parent doesn't want the child to, why do they have to go to counseling? They don't need counseling. They're fine. I can talk to them.
Yeah.
I can.
So I see another thing sort of like that, a red flag item for me is if I see a lot of, especially in motions that the parents are filing, or maybe in the thing that they're saying when I interview them, if they're using a lot of subjective or emotional facts or something about the harm that's going on for the kid or how the kid is feeling or what's going on, but they don't have their kid in counseling. Like, why not? You're saying there's this problem, but you're choosing to not get your kids some help for that problem. So that's something that definitely gets on my radar.
Yeah, and even with a lot of the cases that I work with, I feel like, at this point in that different situation, not really divorce, but if a child comes into care like that, that child should be required to do counseling. They're not always. Same as with a divorce, whether it's high conflict or not.
Yeah.
I feel like that the court should be stepping in if the parents aren't doing it, because that child needs counseling.
Yeah, right. What I usually tell people though too is I'm kind of cautious about that, because if we're forcing the child to go and they're not ready or they don't want to, then we're creating a child who's going to be averse to getting the mental health help that they are going to need when they are ready. So the way I usually approach it is I suggest that they make a deal with the child. You'll go 3 times. After 3 times, if you don't want to continue, you don't have to. And the reason for that is most kids will look at it as it's just another adult that's going to tell them what to do.
Right, like a
So 3
punishment.
And
times
that's a
gives
good
them
point. Yeah, that's why we have
Yeah.
these conversations, because I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 times gives them the exposure to what it is.
Mhm.
And then we also have to honor the child's journey and what they're ready for and what they're not. It might be that they're not ready to talk about it with anybody because it's too much. They might need a relief. I mean, even with adult clients, they take breaks every once in a while because they can't keep looking at it, and that's fine. So then they have maybe a better idea of what it is. Hopefully it was somewhat of a positive experience. And so if they don't want to go back after the third time, they don't have to, but they know that you're going to provide it for them when they ask for it in the future as well.
Yeah. Also, you're giving that kid some agency in a situation where they're otherwise completely powerless and their entire world has been upended.
God, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's the number one thing I want parents who are going through any divorce to hear is you have to work extra hard to build up a child's agency, give them choices all the time, even down to, do you want to go in the right side of the back seat of the car or the left side of the back seat of the car?
Yeah.
You know, make every single thing that doesn't matter a multiple choice to build up their agency, because divorce, I mean, they need it anyway all the time, but divorce really does some damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit, what changes need to be made legally in our education, our culture? What do you think it would be easier to protect children from being weaponized in like parental conflict or whatever? Do you have any?
I think one thing would be mandating more training for judges, magistrates, custody evaluators, GALs, all these grown-ups that are going to come into contact with this family and have something to do with the ultimate decision regarding their parenting plans. Mandating more training for them that really gets to here's how to recognize psychological and emotional abuse tactics. Here's the impact of those tactics. Here's how to help mediate those. Really teaching them about coercive control. Here's what this is. Here's what it looks like. Here's how it might show up. So that these people have more information going into a setting. And so that we stop having cases default to this is just a high conflict case. These parents are high conflict. Really trying to get at which parent is high conflict. Is it actually both of them, or is it just one of them? And to that end, maybe having we normalize the idea of using forensic testing for these parents to figure out what are their personalities like? How are they conflicting with one another? Is one of them truly toxic for this kid? I think we don't utilize that enough. And in Ohio, at least, in the statute, it says the court can order physical and mental examinations of the parents in trying to figure out the best interests of the kids. And I don't see it happen barely ever.
Yeah.
And I think if we normalize that, it would be very helpful in really, I don't know, getting the most effective solution for the family and for the kids.
And why don't you think that like those type of tests are ordered, or why don't you think that that happens? Is it just because of money? Is it just because of, yeah.
They are
Michelle's
expensive.
over there like, yeah, it's money.
They are expensive. There's also difficulty sometimes in finding a practitioner that's willing to work in a custody setting. It's a lot easier to find testing for purposes of, are you fit to stand trial in a criminal matter or something. So it takes, well, there's this stigma about mental health matters, and, are you just labeling someone as crazy? Or so I think that there's that. I think it takes control away from the courts in a sense. The judge is coming in as the trier of fact, and they're in the best position to judge credibility of witnesses and things like that. And so in certain cases, I think it could really kind of get at the ego of that trier of fact if some other expert's going to come in and say, oh, no, the person that you thought was very credible, they're actually just really charming because they have narcissistic personality disorder.
And you fell for it.
You fell for it. Yeah. So I think that's one of the barriers there.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, definitely inaccessibility because of money, and it's huge. It costs a whole lot of money to get a psychological assessment, and they're worth it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, having done them, I mean, it can take, up to 4 hours of just sitting with the person you're assessing, but then you have to make calls to gather collateral damage. You've got another 10 to 20 hours of, if you're going to do it right, of interviews, of looking over, I didn't say collateral damage, I meant collateral information, but looking over, you know, the history of medical history and mental health history, of notes, of emails, of, right, and then the time to score. And it takes a whole lot of mental power to use your critical thinking skills to bring that all together in about a 10-page report, right? And so the process, I mean, it's worth the money that's spent on it. So I don't know how to make it more accessible financially.
Yeah, right now it's, I mean, I'm seeing that on average, just getting the testing done and getting these reports out it's going to run somebody $4,500, $5,000. But then if you really want to introduce that evidence to the court, like in a trial, you're going to have to also have that expert, that psychologist, come in and testify, and that's going to cost you another 5,000. And that's on the low end. That's what you're paying for this whole process. So you know, if we could find a way that this type of testing, this type of examination was normalized and was provided by the court. So if there were forensic psychologists on staff and they're doing this in conjunction with these custody evaluations or something, that would be fantastic. That'd be a great change.
That was actually going to bring up the other part of the inaccessibility, is the reason, right? You can get forensic psychologists and all other court stuff, but you get them in the family court, divorce or custody, especially custody case, right? I mean, I you know, worked with forensic psychologists for years. And I was, you know, being professionally mentored as, and the things that happen, you know, in family court are rough. Like, you're hired by an attorney.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to balance your ethics with not being hired again, right. And then also, if you do diagnose, let's say, narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, or you make a recommendation on personality and a diagnosis that the other parent, who, let's say they do have NPD or ASPD, right? They're toxic. Then they go after, not just their attorney, they'll go after the psychologist to try to get their license. And so it's a very difficult arena for forensic psychologists to be in.
Yeah. And so just real quick, what does that kind of like look like when someone might have those types of disorders that you just mentioned, like, you know, narcissistic personality disorder, or, you know, antisocial
personality.
What does that kind of look like in this arena with
It looks like everything we're talking about, right? I mean, that's pretty we're talking about people who at least have some of those traits, not all of them, right? Some of these behaviors can come out of addiction, they can come out of other personality disorders, they can come out of even just complex PTSD, right? That doesn't change the negative effect that it has on the child. And what we should be looking at, my lofty goal for this really is to have a whole cultural change in the court, where we really are focusing on what the child needs, not what a parent deserves. Right. And so, but yeah,
that's like part of that. What does this look like when you're listening to this parent talk? Are they talking about themselves and what they want, or are they truly talking about what their child needs? And sometimes even parents, they can say something in a way that makes it sound like they're talking about a thing their child needs. But if you really think about it, you know, you can do the math on that and figure out that no, they're actually talking about something they want. So I think that's like a hallmark of these parents, is looking at, are they the I don't know, this is like it always makes me think of the King Solomon story in the Bible. Real mom was not going to cut that baby in half, but the other mom was going to cut that baby in half. And so it's like really looking at, what is this parent's behavior and what's their motivation? Is it about themselves and something they want? Or is it about what's best for the child?
Or
Yeah,
is it to hurt the other parent and continue the control after the fact?
which is really
Exactly.
just still
Yes.
about them and what
Because
they
I
want.
know that I don't feel like the courts put enough time and effort into that. And we could probably have a whole discussion over that, about the post-separation abuse part of this during the case, during everything going on, and what those little things are being done to scare and manipulate and to threaten without it looking threatening to the other parent, to keep them quiet, to keep them from looking into something else. I just want to get them to the place where they're so exasperated, just get it over with. Let's just get it done.
Yeah.
But I think here's the thing and you're right, you're talking about like dog whistling and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we even avoid all of that if we have this perspective shift to what is it that the children deserve.
I
And
agree.
even
Yeah.
like instead of looking at we've talked, lofty goal, right? So instead of looking at removing the blame, right, or the shame or whatever, removing that stuff from it. You're not going to be shamed if you don't know what's going on with them medically. This has been your role as a parent in their life up until the divorce. And that's fine. This has been their role. So because they've been in charge of medical, they're going to continue with medical. But if this person's always been in charge of extracurricular, they stay in charge of extracurricular. If it's feasible within the structure of the family splitting up, everything that's feasible to continue the same as it did before should stay the same as it did before, even if you have to parse out, you have custody decisions over this and you have custody decisions over this. And when I say custody decisions, I mean decisions about parenting, not visitation time. And that's another area. I mean, there's studies that are starting to come out seriously questioning children moving back and forth between homes.
That's so hard. It's so
Testing
hard.
doesn't work for everybody. So, yeah.
Beth had mentioned about post-separation abuse. Is there like a definition about that? Like what exactly, can you explain what that looks like?
I mean, it's really coercive control that continues past the separation. I mean, can you think of a better definition for that? I think it's just another way of saying,
I mean, it's, yeah, I don't know about the definition beyond that, but just like what it looks like is, it looks like 10 OFW messages a day. It looks like a lot of those communications being accusations against the other parent. It's not even really about the kid, it's about some accusation about what they've done or not done correctly.
it looks like withholding money. It looks like
Oh yeah.
buying kids really cool, expensive stuff, but then not letting them take the stuff that you bought for them between the homes.
Yeah. Or like buying them really cool, expensive stuff that they think is really neat, but not paying your half of their dentist bill.
Yeah.
What was I going to say about that? Oh, and when I was listening to your original podcast, right? I cannot tell you the number of times, so I'm kind of hesitant to even bring it up in here because I heard it in your original and I was like, don't, they'll stay. Please don't say that, they'll stay. But you're talking about like something about how the post-separation abuse is worse than the abuse in the relationship, right? And I hear it all the time from the people that come to the group. I've mentioned the group before, it's Surviving Narcissistic Abuse Group. But I hear it all the time where they talk about if I had known it was going to be this hard, I never would have left. But now that I brought that up, but I remember being like, but one of the things that we end up talking about in response to that is, unfortunately, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right. And so the leaving becomes inevitable anyway, because the resentment continues to build and you have to get out. But it is. And I
But
mean,
it's a
the
very real
reality of it.
thing that's not really recognized because it's just thrown up with everything else and just moving the proceedings through and getting to the end and getting things finalized. It's just, yeah, again, it's the label of high conflict.
Yeah.
Really not, shouldn't be a label. It should be looked at as a pattern of abuse that's continuing.
Well, and be taken back to court for what, 8, 10 years sometimes, if
Yeah.
the other person has enough money to do that.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I'll say about leaving, even though post-separation abuse can be and is often worse than the abuse that you experienced in the marriage, the benefit that I think way outweighs it, and that shifts us over to the child focus, is you're not able to protect yourself or them in the marriage.
Sure.
When you separate, you get the opportunity to provide them relief and a safe space in a separate home, usually, and if only briefly,
Mhm.
right? You get the opportunity to show them a safe space. And I'm convinced that, we talk about how we grow up and we marry like our dad, or we marry our mom, or we seek those relationships that, are like our parents. I don't think it's that as much as we learn how to set healthy boundaries for ourselves
Mhm.
by watching both of our parents. And so when we're saying that, what we're actually commenting on is, I learned crappy boundaries from my parents, and I learned that this is what I'm worth in a relationship. And when we leave the parent, I'd like to believe we're beyond the days of Dr. Laura Schlesinger, who was not a doctor in any way of human behavior, and encourage people to stay in crappy marriages and abusive situations for the children. It is better for the children that you leave for that reason.
Yeah. I think there was a famous writer that I absolutely love, Glennon Doyle, and she said, this is the kind of when I knew that I had to leave my marriage, was this question, and it was, would I want this marriage for my children? And that is so profound, because if it's not like, yes, this, marriage is great and I would love this for my family, or my kids or my daughters or whatever, if it's a no, there you go. That's your thing. And ultimately that was, a question that, a lot of people find themselves asking, would I
Yeah,
want
they
this for
do.
my
And
kids?
I've heard a lot of times over the years, and when you get to the point where you know that it's never going to be any better and you've done everything you possibly can
Mhm.
and you're up against a wall, what do you do?
Mm. Also, I think there's this idea that eventually I'll get fed up and just naturally want to leave and it'll feel great. And that's a myth, right? That's just an excuse to not leave. It never, I mean, especially in these situations, you've been gaslit for years to believe that you're the one to blame.
Mhm.
So it's not going to feel good leaving. It's not going to feel that you resolved anything. It's not going to feel relieving for most. I want to leave some space for some people that might feel that way, but I think a lot of people need to hear there's never the perfect time.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's a very good point. So ladies, I just want to say thank you so much. We have covered so much ground today, and I can't thank you enough for, your contribution. And is there anything that, you'd like to share about the work that you're doing, or the business, or how people can kind of contact you from this podcast?
So it's
You're like,
we actually, yeah. So we both, right? Like I run a business where I help people healing from narcissistic abuse, and Melanie's done this family court stuff for a while. And it got to a point where I think we were both feeling that we were just helping people cope with circumstances, and that we could do a better job of addressing the issues in the system of social injustice and generational trauma. By starting our own business, which is Family Court Empowerment Coaching. And so we work together to support and assist people who are going through the family court with a toxic, or I guess high conflict ex, right? How to communicate. We also consult with their attorneys based on their attorney's strategy and what the attorney wants us to help with. As far as being able to put together the discovery, the documents that the client's sending in, and keeping it clean.
And how to effectively cross-examine a custody evaluator or or like mental health counselor, whoever it might be, to really effectively get your points across to the judge through cross-examinations. We assist with that kind of stuff, as well as just helping the litigants just deal with the realities of co-parenting and being in court, which is very stressful, and just helping them with some of their emotional regulation there, and how to respond to the co-parents' communications or not respond, how to identify when this is something they don't need to respond to. So yeah, we work together to do that, kind of this intersection of psychology and law.
And to that end, we've educated local in-school therapists on how to respond to or be there, better support children whose families are going through divorce, and have created some quick reference handouts for that. We also created our own communication model for co-parents that are,
Wow.
in high, that are trying to communicate with a high conflict at, say, other parent in a way that protects the child and
So we have
cut down on post-separation abuse.
We have a class for that called Focused. And then we can also work one-on-one with individuals who are really having trouble with their co-parent communication.
And we've got a series of support groups and workshops that are going to be coming out real soon.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
you both are making a incredible impact in our world, and I can't thank you enough. And we'll put everything like in our show notes and on our Facebook page and all that kind of stuff too, to contact you, ways of.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's familycourtexperts.com.
Okay. Okay.
And we're still building the website, so once I get that up and running, we'll definitely make sure that we have your information and a link to you guys so everybody can find you. This has been great. This has been very insightful, and the work that Danielle and I have done over the few years is there's so many people out there, men and women, that need this kind of support and guidance, and you guys certainly bring that to the table. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. We
Thank you for
appreciate
having
you having us, and totally appreciate the work that you do. I'm so excited to figure out ways that we can collaborate.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, that will conclude our podcast for today. And Stronger Roots, our mission is to keep raising awareness, pushing for change, giving a voice to the stories that too often go unheard. If today's episode was helpful for you, please share it with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe. And don't miss our upcoming conversations. And we are a grassroots nonprofit. Last episode, we had our first show, lots of listeners and lots of support. So thank you for your support, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.